Hi folks, today we're going to breathe some new life into this early 1900s Ansonia clock. Alright, we'll take our clock here, we're going to take the movement out. You just take these two back screws out here. And located on the back of the clock, they hold the back plate on and sandwich the movement in using the back plate to screw it in. The back plate will come right off. Now, in order to get these movements out, you sometimes have to finagle them a little bit here. We're going to turn this in this direction here. Carefully feed it out. Just like that. Okay, we'll set this aside. Next thing we'll need to do is take the hands off. Loosening this nut here. Sometimes you have to use a pair of pliers to get this off. And you see you have 3 screws here. Now this one here looks like it's missing the little tab here that would have held it on. So maybe we'll see if we can make something up there that we can use to hold this on here on the bottom. That's just too loose. It's not going to work. We'll see what we can do. Somebody tried to put some washers on here to try to hold it, but I don't think it's going to hold. We'll figure something out later on that. I'll look in the bottom of the case too to see if it ended up down there, but most likely it was misplaced when it was repaired sometime in the past and will not put back on. You do see that a lot. I think this screw here is obviously a replaced screw, but it works, so we'll use it. Need to move it off. You can see these 2 tabs here were riveted on, but the one here which is bolted onto the bottom plate, and that's the one that's lost. And that uses it to stabilize and hold it onto the bottom portion of the case, so we'll need to do something there. Alright, let's see if we can let the springs down here so that we can then take the movement apart and take this hammer off here on the back. Got a container to start putting all these parts in. There, I'm going to move this case out of the way now. Put it somewhere safe. Let's see here. I have some spring clamps. We'll see what we can find that will fit around those springs. Not a lot of room there. These smaller Ansonia movements are always difficult to work on. See if that'll fit. I think that's going to work there. Find the right size bench key here. I think it's going to be like a 4. This is very important when you're working on any kind of a mainspring driven clock that you do this. You cannot take a clock apart with the spring still wound up. You can injure yourself and damage the clock too as the spring lets down. Now we're going to release the click spring, which is inside here. So we'll just take that spring off so it disengages from the click. And you can see, if you can see that it's off there. We'll use our bench key. And we can carefully let the spring down. Let the clamp retain it. Sure it's on all the way. And it is. This other spring is a little bit bigger. Let's see if we can wind it up a little bit here. So we can get a clamp around it. Let's see if this one works. Now again, we're going to remove the spring from the click here. If we can get our screwdriver in there, it's not a good place to get to. It's in a really bad place, actually. So we can spin it around by letting the strike off a few times here. So we can get to that click spring. You can see how dirty this movement is. It's definitely in need of cleaning and an overhaul. Almost there. All right, we should be able to get this off now. There we are. It doesn't hurt to take the spring off because the click is still engaged. We're going to back off the, wind it up a little bit, and then we can let it come down. Make sure the clamp stays on the spring. And there it is. Okay, so you've got the power completely down and the springs are captured now with these clamps. Now we can start taking the movement apart. Let's begin with this one back here. This is the bridge that, not necessarily a bridge in the sense that it captures anything, but it is where the suspension is suspended from. And we'll just feed the pendulum leader out. Set that aside. This is the adjuster for the timekeeping. We'll remove that. You can see the back is pretty much bare now. We'll start it around. These movements do present a bit of a problem here, because you can see how some of these levers, this is the rack here, is retained with just a collet pushed down, and then the stud is riveted over the collet. I'm going to see if I can leave these on here and clean the movement with these on here. This is the set off lever here. And again, we see the collet with the peened over metal here holding the collet on. You can remove those, but it gets very difficult to get them back on and have them remain tight. So we'll see if we can get away. I don't know if we're going to be able to. I have in the past, and then I haven't. I've done both. I've taken them off, and then not an easy task, but we can get them back on again just by pushing them on. Hopefully they're tight enough. But if we clean it thoroughly and get all the cleaning fluid out of it, we should be able to leave them on. Even though I'm using a water-based solution. We'll see. I do have a petroleum rinse that should remove all the residual water. I'm going to turn this around so the snail is out of the way of the pin for the arrow wheel here. You can see the pin right there. Let's see what we can use here. Let's see if this pushes through this way. Nope, I think it's going to go the other way. Okay, we're going to turn this around some more. Get the snail even further out of the way. This is actually called a snail right here. You can see the shape of it. And this is actually what governs the amount of strikes. You can see up here where you have the least drop. You can see how the rack drops against each segment here. This would be 1 o'clock. As you go all the way around, down here, the farthest drop would be 12 o'clock. The rack drops up, or is picked up, to count the hours. Let's see if we can get this pin out here now. There we go. Now we can take this the snail off along with the wheel there, and this is the arrow wheel. We'll take that off. Make sure you don't have any spacers down here. Some movements do have spacers to keep the arrow wheel kind of up off and engaged properly here on the cannon pinion. So there's no spacers on this one. Now we can remove the rack hook, which is here. Take the screw off here. It's in there pretty tight. There. We'll get the rack out of the way and just lift that off. And then we have the gathering pallet here. We'll need to pop that off. Let me get some movement standoffs here so we can set this moving up. Movements are a little more difficult to work on because of their size. They're smaller and more delicate. This is the American version of the French clock. It's meant to look like or depict a French clock style with its statue style there. The case is usually made out of spelter or pot metal. It's very soft metal. You do have to be careful with it. Let's see here, where can we put this holder here? This could go right here, I suppose. Now this is the gathering pallet here. You can see how much slop is in there. Look at that. That is one badly worn pivot there underneath that gathering pallet. That's why we're overhauling it. Let's see if we can pry this off. Now I just use a couple of screwdrivers. Be very careful with this. Don't want to bend or break that arbor there that the gathering pallet is attached to. There are pullers you can get. I don't have one that's small that's going to fit underneath of it. Let's see here. What can I use? It's coming up now, you can see it. We're going to be doing this very carefully. You don't want this thing to pop off and go flying across the room. It can be hard to film. And there it goes, flying across the room. And here it is right here. All right, so be careful of that, folks. You saw what can happen. All right, we're now ready to take the movement apart. Oops, now I'm dropping everything. Alrighty. Let's get the right nut driver. It's not it. That'll work. And we'll take these 4 nuts off you see here. Alright, now there may be a little bit of residual power on these springs. So when you're taking this top plate off, just do it very carefully. I'm going to lift this straight up and off, you can see that. But we'll take out the strike train here. These wheels are all have strike train components on them, so you cannot mix them up with the time train, so there's no need to mark anything there. And we'll take this off here. That's the hammer. This is the time train, we'll take that out. And we can take the arbor out of the spring just by backing it up a little bit. Comes out just like that. Now I do want to mark this, because these wheels are very similar, but they may not be exactly the same, so I don't want to mix these up. So I'll just put a little bit of a scratch here. We'll just mark the spring with a T for time. I'm going to mark a small T underneath here. Just scratch it in, because when you go to clean it, it's going to clean anything off. If you try to mark it with a pencil or mark like a Sharpie, it's just going to clean it right off. So you do have to scratch it in there. Much as I don't want to scratch stuff into these clocks, I do that. Again, we'll mark this as a strike. We'll mark it as an S. And we'll just take this off. Just like that. And we'll mark it on the underside here so it can't be seen as an S. See those scratched in S there? That'll be retained there even when it's clean. And see if we can get this spring off. This is for the, I think it's the rack hook. So we'll take the spring off here. Pair of tweezers. Maybe just a screwdriver. Let's see if we can get it off. It's a very fine spring. You want to be careful of these springs because they will break. Not the end of the world if it does. You can always just pull a little more excess out, because it's a large coiled spring. You can just probably pull excess out. I've done that. I've retained a spring and just pulled more of it out and then just reattached it. As long as you don't lose a good portion of the spring, you're fine. There. And it's disconnected, and we can take this plate. Then you can see we'll leave this rack on here and this set-off lever, and we'll see how clean we can get it. See how easily it functions. You have to go through the cleaner with it. I'll make sure all the water, I have a compressor which I'll blow carefully on it to make sure any moisture is removed from it. I don't like leaving these on, but like I said, you can do more damage by trying to get these off. So I'm going to leave them alone for now. Good. Put it through the cleaner and see what happens. Now you might be wondering how you're going to get these springs out. I do have a mainspring winder, but these springs are usually not very powerful. We can just take that clamp off and just go like that. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, there are some springs that are large and I wouldn't do that with, then use a mainspring winder, which I do have on the other side of my shop. We'll do the same thing with the strike spring here. Just, of course, carefully hold it with in your fist so it can't just shoot out. You can see that spring was already sticky. Just pop that in there and we'll take it to the cleaner. And we'll come back when it's all clean. Okay. Fluid's been cleaned. We're ready to go. And the first thing I'd like to do is put this spring, see if we can wind it back into these clamps. Okay, let's put this in the mainspring winder here. So we can get the spring wound up. Get the clamp back on it. The most dangerous part about clock repair is dealing with these springs. This is not a very heavy duty spring, thank goodness. Get it just enough so we can get the clamp on it. There we go. There you go, all set to go. Now let's take a look at these pivots here. And what I do is I run my finger across the pivot. Feel how rough it is. As well as one there we'll need to polish. I see a bent one here. You can see that on the camera. So we will have to straighten that one out. We'll set that aside. Put that in my pile there. Some pivots that need work. It's a little rough. And that one, these two feel good, so I'm not going to bother with that. I could use a touch-up. And that one could use a touch-up. This is the escape wheel. And that one could use a touch-up for sure. And I think that's it. The fly usually is not bad, and that's not bad. And these pivots aren't bad either. So we've got some work to do here on the pivots. Let's see if we can straighten that bent one out first. All right, excuse my dirty bench here. We got powder all over here from pivot polishing. Let me find a collet here that this pivot will fit in. It looks like a pretty good one there. We got to be very careful with this kind of a pivot. It's so fine, so small. It's not a French clock, which tend to be even smaller, but it is still a delicate one. And you can see how bent it is here. Bring my tailstock close to it. We'll see if we can do a little tweak to it. Just like that. It's pretty close. Too much there. It's pretty good. Maybe a little bit more. All right, I'm okay with that. You can check the other one too, just for the heck of it. That one's all right. Okay. Well, this is the escape wheel. This is a little bit rough here too, so let's go ahead and chuck this up. And we'll show you how I do the pivot polishing. Now, I have a burnisher along with a file that you can use. I may touch it up a little bit with the file here first. Just like that. Use a burnisher, but I also use a polishing wheel system here that I have. I'll show you what that is. I use a Dremel tool. This one's a Ryobi actually. And we use a series of polishing wheels. Now we'll start with this one here. You can start with a coarser one if the pivot is really worn down. That's the coarse one. I don't think we need that for this pivot here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spin the lathe, have the setting on low here for this tool, and we can go like that. And we'll graduate to the finest one here, which is the pink one. You see why this powder is all over the bench now. And we'll just clean this off. Feels nice and smooth. I don't know if you can see that, or the camera will pick it up or not. The other pivot's okay, so we're going to go on to the next wheel. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to check, see what bushings we need to replace here. So we're going to put our wheels back in. This is after the pivot polishing has been done. You definitely want to check this after you do the pivot polishing because you may reduce the size of the pivots wire polishing it. So we'll start with this wheel here. That's the strike. And that's time. There's the warning wheel for the strike. And we'll stick our fly in here. Drop this in. Oops, got it wrong. That's the way it goes. And we'll finagle our wheels in here. You see that? That's how the train goes. Now let's check our pivots. Where if we have a sloppy pivot, we're going to need to rebush it. You can see one there as I wiggle that around. And this is the one we saw with the gathering pallet on it. Watch that one there. That's really worn. So what we'll do is we'll mark those. I just use a pencil. Go grab one here. And the reason we can use a pencil is we can clean this off afterward. We're going to do a final cleaning of this after I do the bushing work. So I'll mark that one there, just so we can see it. This one here we know needs it. So we have two there so far. Warning wheel's all right, the fly's all right. Turn it over to the other side here. This side's all right, this one needs it. Mark that. The rest of them are okay. So we have one on the back and two on the front on the strike side. Again, you need to do this after you do the pivot polishing. Check for which ones are sloppy. And we found three altogether. Okay, we'll move these wheels out of the way. We're going to put the wheels for the time train in here. See if I got that right. Check the position of that escape wheel. That should be right. Put this back together again. We'll check all our bushings. pivots back in here. You can see that's the way it goes there. You can line up the pallets to make sure they... Yep. And sometimes you can get the escape wheel upside down, depending on the clock. We want to make sure the wheels are in properly. And let's check our pivots. And there's one right there, if you can see. I moved the wheel around next to it. You can see that one's kind of sloppy. So we'll mark that one. Don't really see anything else on the front here that needs to be done. This one here is marginal. I think we'll do it. Mark that one. So 2 on the front. I got a really bad one back here. You look at that one right there. Wiggle the gear around next to it. You can see that. Slopping around there. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. It's this one here. Right up there. So we'll need to mark that one. Yeah, maybe this one here. It's marginal, but we'll do it. Might as well since we have it apart. Okay. So, we know we have our pivot holes marked here that need to be done. Let's set our wheels aside here. Just remember what pivot goes where, so you can get the proper size bushing. You can see our plate is marked with our pencil marks. Front plate. This front plate, the other was a back plate. We'll go ahead and we'll do the bushing work. Alright, let's set up our bushing tool here. I'll show you how we just do the one bushing here. You can see where I've marked my bushings. We'll do this one right here. Locate it. This is a Burr bushing tool, by the way. KWM makes one. It's a really good tool. We all sort of generally work the same way. It's a Swift system, actually. It's the same system they would use for rejeweling a watch. It's the same idea. We're just going to cut out the old pivot hole to a larger diameter and press in a new brass, or sometimes bronze. You can buy them either brass or bronze. Bronze are a lot more expensive. They may give you slightly longer life. This This is our bushing set here. I'll just point the camera down. I don't want to move this around too much. If I drop it, I'm in for 50,000 bushing pickup, which I do not want to do. Now, you need to select our wheel that's going to get the new bushing. It's this one here. And we're going to just select the bushing out of our kit here. And it fits closely around that pivot, because we're going to have to broach it out. See that? That's a pretty good fit right there. So I'm just going to set this here. Now we're going to swap out the pointer or locator for a cutter. Now, I'll mention that the pivot holes, sometimes they wear so severely that they're actually oblong, and it can be difficult to find the proper size. This is not one of them right here. This is just worn more round than oblong. But in that case, you can take a small file and just sort of file out. There may be a couple of pivot holes that need to do that, but you would just file out the hole with a small file to get it sort of repositioned where the hole should be. In other words, make it larger, but make it larger in the where it's supposed to be. Cut this here. We'll just graduate up till we get to the cutter size that matches this bushing. It's going to be one more, I think. Yep. This is the size here. Each of these bushings actually are sized with an outside diameter, inside diameter, and a height or thickness. So you want to select the one that matches your plate thickness the closest. This is one here. I think it's a 1.50 millimeter, which will match this plate pretty closely. And this, you can see the cutters actually have numbers on them. And usually the bushings are about 0.03 of an inch bigger than your cutter, so you'll get a press fit, nice and tight. So this should be the last cutter I use for this one. I'm just going to cut it out so it's the right diameter, and then we're going to just press our bushing in. There it is. You can actually remove the burr by I just spin it around with my fingers just to make sure there's no burr, which can be raised from cutting using this cool tool here. I think it's called a chamfering tool. Now we'll put our stake in here. It allows us to press the bushing in. Put our bushing in position. Now you just have a nylon faced hammer here that I can use to tap it down. See, that's what it looks like. And we'll do the other bushings, and then we'll come back and we'll show you how to do the broaching. Now we have our broaches. We'll start with our cutting broaches, which have this sort of hexagonal look to it. We start with those to open the new bushings up to the right size. We'll start with back plate here. And that will be this wheel here. We'll go there. just like that. The winder, main wheel, that's the strike side, goes in like this. So we know that this wheel goes in like this. So we'll have to cut this pivot hole out to the proper size. Take our pin vise, and we'll carefully broach this hole out. And get a little bit larger. It's getting there. Some of the deeper or larger bushings, you can go from both sides. I'll just touch up this side a little bit here to make sure you're not tapered. That's pretty good right there. You can see how much play we've got there. You can go a little bit more than that if you wanted to. I think we'll stick with that. Alright, that one goes there. And this wheel goes here. That's the way it's supposed to work. And then of course the escape wheel goes here. So now we know what pivot we're working with here, this one right here. And we'll broach this out slightly. It already fits in there, I just want to open it up a little more. Again, we can go from both sides. When you broach it, make sure you do it perpendicular to the plate. That's good right there. Alright, now let's go with the round broaches. Start with this one now. These round broaches, you can see, are just smooth. And you would use these after you use the cutting broaches. This helps to burnish the inside of the pivot hole. Doesn't help to, it actually does burnish the inside of the pivot hole so that it's nice and smooth. So we'll just run that around a couple times. I like to run it from both sides. And this one over here. That's a bigger one there, so we're going to need to get a bigger round brooch. Alright, now let's work on the front plate here. Now what I'll do, I'll test each wheel by putting it into movement individually. Let me just get rid of some of these metal shavings here from broaching it out. First we'll start with this one here. It's the first wheel in the time train. We broached on, we actually repivoted We actually rebushed on both sides. Yeah, it spins freely. I'm checking for end shake also. Let me get my pair of tweezers here to show you what I mean. You want a little bit of end shake here. See that? Another thing you must check for. Make sure it's nice and free, or else it'll bind and the clock will stop. So that looks good there. We'll try the next wheel that we rebushed. And I believe that's this one here. I'm just going to go ahead and put these three in because we rebushed all three of these. We're going to try them all out at once together to make sure they mesh properly. You might want to hold the movement with movement holders while doing this. I've gotten used to just doing it by freehand here. Once again, we're checking the end shakes here. Nice and free. Spin the wheels. Nice and free, looks good. Good there. Now let's check the strike side. Like this one might have moved, the bushing might have walked off a little bit here, off center. You can see by the wheel it's slightly crooked. I want to see whether that's going to be an issue or not. And that's fairly important because that's where the gathering pallet is, right here. So if it doesn't pick up the rack properly because it's moved away from the rack, then we may have an issue. All right, we're going to clean these plates one last time. Get the pencil marks off. And we'll start our assembly when they come back. Movement's had its final cleaning here. Let's put it together. So we'll put the rack hook arbor in here. Goes up there. We have a little spring we gotta get connected to it. Okay, that's on. sure everything's free. All right, there it is. Well, let's see where we are with the indexing with the wheel here. You want that hammer to just drop, and then have the train lock right afterwards. So I'm going to set it up where we can see if we can do that. Yeah, let's touch it up with some oil here. Let's stick the gathering pallet on here. Alright, we give the gathering pallet a tap so that it's on there good. Put the arrow wheel on here. Snail. And we'll need to reset the snail here. Make sure it's indexed properly. You do that by just turning it around, see where it drops. Apologize for these plastic gloves. I'm going to take this one off here. You can see where that dropped there. I'm going to turn the snail around. Probably best to gauge it by setting it to the 11 o'clock position, which is the smallest step generally. See what I'm doing there? I'm actually having the rack drop on this 11 o'clock position. Now let's bring it back up. Turn the hands around again. See what it does on the half hour. We're supposed to have a drop once on half hour. I may need to readjust that rack hook there. Bring it around to the 12 o'clock position. That's the 1 o'clock. That's pretty good, I think. It didn't have a washer with it, so I think I am going to put a washer on it here to retain that arrow wheel, but also retain the snail. See if I have something here that will fit. See what I've done there? I put a wire on there to retain it. We'll put a little bit of lubrication on the main springs. I like to lubricate my mainsprings after installing them. Of course, when you're putting them in a barrel, it's different. You have to lubricate them as you put them in, or right after you put them in before you put the barrel cap on. We'll show you how this works here. This will be the half hour. And we'll turn up to 6 o'clock here. I'll run it outside the case on my stand here for a day or two just to make sure everything's okay, and then we'll put it back together in the case. Okay folks, that'll do it for this video. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you like the content of the channel, please consider subscribing, and don't forget to hit that bell notification. It's going to let you know when I am uploading another video. And I do have more restorations planned. If you look over my shoulder right where I'm pointing here, I have a nice old cuckoo and quail that we're going to be doing next. I'm not quite sure when we're going to be doing that, but it'll be sometime soon. So please stay tuned to the channel. We'll see you in the next video, and please stay safe out there. Bye-bye.